like and make sure to engage in comments and share this video to your friends and story lovers. And click on the subscribe button on the screen for more real and true stories like this. I never thought I'd be telling this story, not because I'm ashamed of it, though a part of me probably should be, but because it still feels surreal, like one of those strange plots from a romance novel where the bad guy ends up getting the girl. But this isn't fiction. This is my real life. And the girl I used to bully in elementary school, she's now my wife. Crazy, right? To be honest, I didn't even remember everything I did to her until she reminded me years later, laughing while sipping coffee on our third date. And even though she chuckled as she said it, there was this faint flicker in her eyes. Something that told me, yeah, she forgave me. But she never forgot. And she shouldn't, because back then I was a jerk. A loud, immature, insecure kid who didn't know how to deal with his own mess. So, he made someone else feel smaller just to feel big. That someone was Natalie. Natalie Miller. She was quiet, kept to herself, always reading something, always scribbling in some little notebook. She had these big glasses that seemed to swallow half her face, and she wore hand-me-down clothes that weren't exactly stylish. To me, and to a lot of other kids, she was an easy target. But what makes my story different is that I didn't just tease her, I tormented her. I once ripped out a page from her notebook during lunch and read her poem aloud in the cafeteria, mocking every word. Kids laughed, she cried. I remember feeling powerful that day. And now I wish I could go back and slap that version of myself in the face. There was even a time I punched her in the arm during recess. Nothing brutal, not enough to leave a bruise, but enough for her to flinch when I raised my hand too fast a week later. I still remember the look on her face. She didn't say anything. She just walked away and never told anyone. And here's the twisted part. No one ever stopped me. Not the teachers, not the other kids. It was like everyone had silently agreed that Natalie didn't matter enough to defend. And so I kept going, because back then, hurting her was easier than looking at myself. The thing is, I wasn't born mean. I was just lost. My dad had walked out on us when I was 8. My mom was working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. And I was angry at everything. Angry at the world. Angry at the kids who had both parents. Angry at the teachers who never noticed me unless I caused trouble. Angry at the mirror because I didn't like what I saw. But none of that justifies what I did to Natalie. We went to the same school for 3 years. She never said a word to me after 5th grade. And by the time middle school rolled around, we had gone to different schools. Life moved on. I forgot all about her. Fast forward a decade later, I was working at a bookstore downtown. Not the job I imagined growing up, but honestly, it was peaceful, quiet, surrounded by paperbacks and old novels with the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the corner cafe. It was a good place for a guy trying to reset his life. One afternoon, this woman walked in. She was wearing a light blue coat, carrying a laptop bag over one shoulder. Her hair was up in a loose bun, and she had glasses on, smaller than before, but familiar. She walked straight to the poetry section. Something about her stopped me. Maybe it was the way she studied the spines of the books, like each one held a secret she needed to unlock. Maybe it was the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. But it hit me. I knew her. Not the way you know a stranger's face, but the way a bad memory clings to your chest when you least expect it. It was Natalie. My heart sank. My mouth went dry. For a second, I actually debated ducking behind the shelves and pretending I didn't exist. But something pulled me forward. I walked up to her slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wild animal I had once wounded. She turned, and before I could say a word, she smiled. "You work here?" she asked. Her voice was calm, measured, like she already knew I recognized her and was giving me the chance to pretend otherwise. "Yeah," I said. "I do. You're Natalie, right?" She nodded. "And you're Ethan?" The way she said my name, it was neutral, not warm, not cold, just matter of fact. But there was something in her eyes that flickered again, like she was watching me closely, reading me like one of her old books. I fumbled. Wow, it's been a long time. 15 years, she said. Since 3rd grade, you punched me in the arm at recess, remember? She said it with a grin, but it was the kind of grin people wear when they're still holding on to a memory that once hurt. I laughed awkwardly. Yeah, I was a little monster back then. "A little?" she teased, tilting her head. I looked down, suddenly embarrassed by the kind of person I used to be. "I'm sorry, Natalie. I mean it. I was dealing with a lot of stuff back then, but that's no excuse. You didn't deserve any of it." She nodded, and for a moment there was silence between us. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I forgave you a long time ago, but I never thought I'd run into you again, especially not here." That day, we talked for almost an hour about books, about college, about where life had taken us. She had become a writer, not just the hobby kind, an actual published author. She'd written a small poetry collection that had gained attention online. She even had a decent following on social media. I was floored. This girl I once tried to silence had found her voice, and the world had started listening. When she left the store that day, I felt something strange. Not guilt, though that was there too, but admiration. Like, how did she manage to become this strong, grounded, quietly powerful woman after everything? I didn't expect to see her again, but a week later, she came back. This time, she brought her book and asked me to carry a few copies on our shelves. Said she thought they'd fit right in with our local author section. I said yes, of course, and offered her a cup of coffee from the cafe next door. That's how it started. Not a love story, not yet. Just two people reconnecting, one trying to redeem himself, the other cautiously opening the door. We started having coffee once a week. At first, it was friendly, casual. She told me about her writing routines, the challenges of self-publishing, her upcoming blog tour. I told her about my job, my attempts at fixing the relationship with my mom, and the short stories I sometimes scribbled in the back room when no one was watching. Over time, our conversations went deeper. She told me about the years after elementary school. The bullying hadn't stopped with me. It continued through middle school. But somewhere along the line, she stopped caring what people thought. She started writing poems and short stories to process her pain. Her first poem, in fact, had been about me. She didn't tell me the title until months later. It was called The Boy Who Threw Stones. That poem, it was brutal, honest, beautiful. She had captured my cruelty with such precision, but somehow she ended the piece with a line that wrecked me. He threw stones at a girl who bloomed anyway. I couldn't believe it. She had every reason to hate me, to ignore me, to walk away the moment we crossed paths again. But instead she saw me. Not just the boy I was, but the man I was trying to become. And something in her softened. Maybe because she could see I had changed. Or maybe because life has a weird way of giving us second chances if we're brave enough to take them. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how much of Natalie I had never really known. Back then, I only saw the surface. The shy girl with big glasses and thrift store jeans. But now I saw the soul beneath all that. The way she laughed with her whole body. The way she paused before answering questions like every word mattered. She wasn't just smart, she was intentional. Everything she did had thought behind it. Purpose. I remember one rainy afternoon. We were sitting by the window at the cafe next to the bookstore, the kind of day where the sky stays gray and time feels slower. She was staring out at the street, her fingers wrapped around a mug of hot tea, and she said something that stuck with me. I used to write letters I never sent to people who hurt me to myself. Sometimes I think we all carry ghosts we never talk about. I just stared at her because for the first time in a long while, I didn't want to run from my ghosts. I wanted to name them, face them. And somehow being with her made that feel possible. That day, I told her everything. I told her about my dad leaving, about the nights I waited by the window hoping he'd pull into the driveway and the silence that always answered. I told her about the anger, the loneliness, how I used to feel like I was on the outside of everything. I didn't spare the ugly parts either. I told her about the fights, the times I messed up in school, the people I pushed away. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I was done, she reached across the table and touched my hand. Just one quiet gesture, but it meant more than any words could have. That was the moment everything shifted. We weren't just two people catching up anymore. We were two people unraveling slowly in front of each other, showing the bruises, the scars, the parts most people hide. I didn't ask her out officially for another 2 weeks. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I was terrified. Terrified she'd say no. Terrified I didn't deserve someone like her. Terrified she'd remember too vividly who I used to be and decide the risk wasn't worth it. But I asked anyway. I kept it simple. One night, we closed the bookstore together. She had stayed late to sign a few copies of her book for a customer. And as we stepped out into the cool night air, I just blurted it out. I really like you, Nat, and if you're open to it, I'd love to take you out. Like really out, not just coffee at work. She looked at me for a long time. Then, without saying a word, she smiled and nodded. Our first official date was at a little outdoor jazz spot 2 blocks from the bookstore. She wore a navy dress and silver earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head. I wore a button-down shirt I borrowed from my roommate, still with the tag on it. We talked for hours, laughed. She even made fun of how nervous I looked. When I tried to eat shrimp with a fork, it nearly stabbed my hand. It felt easy, natural, like something we had slipped into instead of forced. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. We read each other's favorite books. I watched her perform at a local poetry slam. She was electric. She came to my short story workshop and sat in the back, quietly smiling at me the whole time. She told me she'd forgiven me long before she ever saw me again. That writing helped her do that. But healing, she said, that was different. Forgiveness was a decision. Healing was a process. And I got it. I truly did. There were moments when we'd be walking down the street, and I'd reach out to grab her hand and she'd flinch. Not on purpose, just instinct. Like some muscle memory from a time when being near meant getting hurt. Those moments broke me. I didn't push her to get over it. I just stayed. I kept showing up. I gave her space when she needed it, and closeness when she allowed it. I didn't try to fix her. I just loved her. One night, we were lying on her couch watching some old romantic movie she adored. I wasn't even paying attention to the screen. I was watching her. Her head rested on my shoulder, her fingers tracing the edge of my shirt, and I whispered, "Do you ever regret it?" She looked up. "Regret what?" Giving me a second chance. She didn't even hesitate. "Number because you didn't waste it." That line, it stayed with me. Because in my entire life, I'd never felt like I'd been worthy of someone's grace. And there she was, Grace, sitting right next to me in a sweatshirt and fuzzy socks, telling me that I'd become someone worth loving. We dated for a little over 2 years. During that time, I learned what it really meant to love someone. Not just the flowers and dates and kisses, but the quiet sacrifices. The nights spent holding her while she cried because an old wound reopened. The mornings I woke up early to leave notes in her lunch before a big meeting. The way she'd smile when she found them. Like every word was a reminder that she mattered. Her career kept growing. She got picked up by a small publishing house. She was invited to speak at conferences. People began recognizing her in bookstores, asking her to sign things. I was proud of her in a way I can't describe me. I kept writing too slowly, quietly in the background. She encouraged it always. And then one day I knew I wanted to marry her. Not because everything was perfect, but because even when things were messy, even when old ghosts crept in, even when neither of us had the right words, we still chose each other. Every day we showed up. I planned a proposal that felt like us. No flash mobs, no cameras, no crowds, just us. We went back to the elementary school playground where we first met. It had changed over the years. The swings were new. The slide was gone. But the bench by the corner fence was still there. I brought her there on a Sunday afternoon under the excuse of showing her something I'd written. I sat her down, handed her a notebook, and asked her to read the first page. It was a letter. A letter to the girl I once bullied. A letter to the woman who gave me a second chance. A letter that ended with the words, "If you say yes, I promise to spend the rest of my life earning that second chance." Over and over again. When she looked up, I was already on one knee. She didn't cry. She laughed. That soft, familiar, musical laugh that made me fall in love with her in the first place. And then she said yes. Just like that, the bench we sat on as kids became the place we started the rest of our lives. Now, years later, she still jokes about those comics I drew about her in 3rd grade. Says I always had a weird sense of humor. She keeps one of them in a scrapbook. She says it reminds her how far we've both come. And me, I still wake up some mornings and can't believe I get to love the same girl I once didn't understand. That life gave me a second chance. And somehow I didn't screw it up. But here's the truth. None of this would have happened if she hadn't forgiven me. It takes a special kind of strength to look someone in the eye and see who they could become instead of who they used to be. Natalie taught me that. Every day she still does. She's the proof that people change, that healing is possible, that love can grow in the most unexpected places. Getting married doesn't magically fix everything. No one really tells you that. People talk about love like it's a destination. Like once you find the right one, everything else falls into place. But love, real love, it's not about getting to the finish line. It's about deciding every single day that you're going to keep running together, even when the road gets ugly. And for Natalie and me, that road did get ugly sometimes. Not because we stopped loving each other, but because love alone doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't cancel out old fears or rewrite history. It just gives you a safe place to face those things. Our first year of marriage was like walking through a storm with an umbrella full of holes. There were amazing moments, laughing in the kitchen while cooking, dancing in the living room to old songs, long talks under the stars. But there were also arguments, silent dinners, nights where we slept with our backs turned, not out of hate, but because neither of us knew how to say what we were feeling. Sometimes Natalie would pull away without warning. I'd say something innocent, casual, and she'd go quiet. I could see it in her eyes, a memory, something I couldn't reach. and I'd freeze, not knowing what to do. The same girl who forgave me still carried the weight of what I used to be. One night, about 6 months into our marriage, it came to a head. We were lying in bed. I had touched her arm gently and she flinched. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed, enough that it stung. I sat up. "Do I scare you?" She looked at me surprised. "What?" "Be honest, Nat. Do I still scare you even now?" She sat up too, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Sometimes," she whispered. That crushed me. But I didn't get angry. I didn't defend myself. I just listened. She said, "It's not you now. It's the shadow of you. The old you, the one who made me feel small. Sometimes he shows up in my head. Even when you're being completely loving, I hate that he's still there." I wanted to cry. I felt like I'd failed her, like I had carried that ghost into our home. But she reached for my hand and said, "You're not him anymore." I know that. But healing isn't linear, and sometimes I just need time to remind myself that I'm safe now. That was the night we promised to always be honest about our ghosts. She told me hers. I told her mine. I told her about the pressure I still felt to be good enough for her. Like I was constantly trying to make up for the past. How I still woke up with nightmares about being the person I used to be. How I sometimes felt like I didn't deserve her love. She squeezed my hand and said, "But you are enough because you're not hiding. You're growing." That was it. That was the turning point. We didn't suddenly become perfect, but we started being more real, less afraid to say, "Hey, I need space right now." Or, "That thing you said triggered something." We learned how to fight better, not to win, but to understand. We learned that sometimes love means letting the other person feel broken without trying to fix them right away. And slowly the shadows faded. We created new memories. We traveled. Small trips at first, a weekend in the mountains, a road trip along the coast. Then bigger ones, Paris, where she cried under the Eiffel Tower after finding a bookshop she'd dreamed about as a kid. Tokyo, where I surprised her with tickets to a poetry event she'd always wanted to attend. Each trip was a reminder that we weren't trapped by the past anymore. We were building a future that was fully ours. One night back home, I found her sitting at her desk staring at an old notebook. She looked up and smiled. "Remember the poem I wrote about you in 3rd grade?" I laughed. "The boy who threw stones." Kind of hard to forget. She handed me the notebook. I wrote a new one. I opened it. The title read, "The Man Who Built Bridges." I read the first few lines and I swear my heart stopped. "Once a boy threw words like stones, sharp and fast, to break my bones. Now a man with weathered hands builds soft bridges where walls once stood." I couldn't speak. I just looked at her. "You don't throw stones anymore," she said. "You build." That was one of the most powerful moments of my life. And she was right. I had changed. Not just because of guilt or regret or love, but because she gave me the space to grow without shame. She didn't rush my healing, and I didn't rush hers. There's something powerful about marrying someone who saw the worst in you and still chose to believe in your best. It doesn't mean we don't mess up. It means when we do, we fight our way back to each other. We remind ourselves of where we started and how far we've come. A few months ago, we visited her childhood home. Her parents had moved away, but the house was still there. Peeling paint, a crooked mailbox, and that old oak tree she used to read under. She pointed to a spot in the grass. "That's where I sat the day you tore up my poem." I felt sick all over again, but then she smiled. "And that's also where I wrote the first line of my first published book." I looked at her stunned. She nodded. "I didn't realize it at the time, but you kind of lit the spark. I just had to turn pain into power." That's who she is. Someone who turns pain into power. Someone who takes broken things and makes them beautiful. And somehow she chose me. So, no, this isn't a perfect love story. It's not polished or pretty all the time, but it's real. It's two people who hurt and healed and chose each other over and over again. And maybe that's the best kind of story there is. Life didn't stop teaching us after we said I do. In fact, the biggest lessons came after. Not from the vows or the rings or the honeymoon glow, but from the ordinary, unfiltered, imperfect days. The days when the dishes piled up and the words came out wrong. The days when one of us was silent and the other too tired to ask why. The days when love didn't look like flowers or kisses, but like patience, like space, like staying, even when it would have been easier to walk into the next room and shut the door. People think real love is fireworks. But the truth, it's not the fire that matters, it's the warmth. And Natalie became the warmth in my life. There were times I'd wake up early just to watch her sleep, not in some dramatic movie kind of way, but because it grounded me. It reminded me that somehow, despite everything I'd done, this woman had chosen to let me love her. She had opened her world to the same boy who once tried to break it. Sometimes I still wonder why. One night I asked her. It was late and we were lying on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket under the stars. The kind of quiet that only happens when the rest of the world is asleep. Why me, Nat? Why after everything? She took a long breath and said, because you did the one thing most people never do. You didn't just say sorry. You became sorry. And then you became better. That line changed me because apologies are easy. Real change, that's rare. It's slow. It's uncomfortable. And most people give up before they even begin. But she saw me try over and over, and that was enough. I think about that now, especially when we talk about having kids. Because one day we'll have to explain to them how their dad once hurt their mom. And we'll do it not to relive the past, but to show them what growth looks like. To show them that people can change, that broken beginnings don't mean broken endings. We'll tell them that their mom was strong before she was loved, and their dad was lost before he was found, and somehow they found each other anyway. Love isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about waking up every day and choosing someone again and again. Even when the past tries to creep in, even when the future feels uncertain, it's about the messy, awkward, courageous act of becoming the kind of person your partner deserves. Even if it takes a lifetime to get there, I still carry guilt. I think I always will. But I don't let it own me, because guilt isn't meant to be a prison. It's meant to be a teacher. And mine taught me to slow down, to pay attention, to speak gently, to never raise a hand even in frustration, and to always, always build bridges instead of throwing stones. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this. You are not defined by your worst moments. You are defined by how you respond to them, by who you become after the damage is done, by the people you love better, slower, more carefully, because you remember what it's like to break something and never want to break anything again. Natalie and I aren't a fairy tale. We're something better. We're two people who saw the worst in each other and still showed up. We're two stories that collided, shattered, and rebuilt into something new. Something honest, something lasting. So if you're out there wondering if change is real, if healing is possible, if love can grow from the ugliest of places, it can. But only if you're willing to face yourself. Only if you're brave enough to stay when it's uncomfortable. Only if you realize that love isn't something you deserve. It's something you earn. Day by day, step by step, word by word. Like writing a story you never thought anyone would read and realizing it changed someone's life, maybe even your own. That was satisfying, wasn't it? If this story touched you even a little, be sure to give a like and subscribe for more just like